I started writing the Pulse of DCC column back in 2014. My wife and I were actually on vacation in Florida with some friends, and I was catching up on my reading, and it was an ad in the NMRA magazine. Stephen Priest was the editor at that time. And I had met Steve, although he lives in the area, I'd met Stephen a couple of times. He has since become a very good friend of mine. And I contacted him and I said, tell me more about this, and I would be interested. I was in the process of making a lot of changes in my professional life. What I was doing is, you and I had talked the other day, I had worked in the corporate world for 25 years. Then I started my own business doing fire and water mitigation and restoration, and was phasing out of that and was looking to shift back and do things a little bit easier, and planning to have a little bit more time for model railroading, including writing the column. So I have continually wrote that column since May of 2014, missing only a couple of times here and there.
In addition to writing the Pulse of DCC column, you're also the and I always forget what it's called, the work group, the DCC working group for the NMRA. And
Yes,
how long have you been in that as well?
About 3 years doing that. Actually, I joined them. Well, once again, Stephen Priest got involved and volunteered me for something. Just a little bit of history about command control and digital command control. Back in the before this earliest recollection of it was Alan McClellan had the GE t-trak system in his railroad, which was one of the first, and it allowed you to take a throttle and independently control locomotives. That was great. Then in the late 70s, a fellow by the name of Keith Gutierrez, who founded CVP Products, EZDCC, had a series of articles in Model Railroad magazine to build the CTC-16, which I did back in that time period. Then there were other companies that built on the back of what Keith had done, such as Man-Made Products and Larry Keeler here in the Kansas City area. And we had Dynatrol and Keller and a lot of other manufacturers. But the problems were many of these systems did not interchange with one another. You bought a system, you were dedicated to that system. Well, the group started studying that. The NMRA group started studying it, and they came up with a couple of ideas. And Bern Lens, the Lens DCC company, Bern actually donated on a non-exclusive basis the licensing right to the NMRA for the system. And the group looked at what he had, his approach, the way he did it, the expandability of it, and they found that it was the best approach that anybody had taken thus far.
So the DCC from, let's just say, Digitrax, is exactly the same as the DCC from NCE and exactly the same as the DCC from ESU? Or are there, is there kind of, I'm leading the witness a little bit on this, because I kind of know the answer, but it does seem like there's this central body that's the same, but yet not all the manufacturers aren't 100% compliant in certain areas.
Okay, you bring up a really good point, Heath. There's a core central area that has to be the same for things to work. Then outside of that, I have let's take your example between Digitrax and NCE. Digitrax has a way to connect locomotives in multiple unit consists, and
Yes.
NCE has a different way to do it.
Yes.
Now, you can be a fan of one or the other, but the central part all works the same. One of my favorite comparisons is between two of the really good decoders on the market, which is Soundtrax and ESU. ESU has one method of doing things which they call drive hold, and that's where you key some stuff into your throttle and you rev up the engine before the train actually starts to move, much like in the real world where you got heavy tonnage. Soundtracks, on the other hand, has digital dynamic exhaust, which they monitor the load on the motor and they change the sound of the prime mover according to that load. But yet, on my model railroad right here, I have Soundtracks decoders and I have ESU decoders, and they both work. They just work a little differently. And
you talk about items being compliant, and I'm until I talked to you, like I knew there was a DCC standard, but I didn't realize that manufacturers could actually apply to be compliant. Can you kind of explain that compliance process and what that is?
Well, it's much the same whether it's DCC or for a car or a locomotive. Manufacturers, and we get requests quite often, particularly for new people coming into the industry, new small manufacturers, and they will ask us what is required to get a manufacturer's ID. Now, when you put a decoder on JMRI Decoder Pro and read that decoder, it will look at CV number 8 and tell you who the manufacturer is. It will look in CV7 and it'll tell you which model decoder it is. So you, as the user, can just let JMRI do that for you. So,
but is that set by the NMRA, or did the JMRI people just sort of say, whether you're compliant or not, we're going to put you into Decoder Pro? Because David was asking if the standards are voluntary on the part of the manufacturers, aren't they?
Yes, the standards are voluntary, but you're well advised as a manufacturer to be compliant, because if you have a product that doesn't comply and it gives people problems, word will get around, so and so's decoder doesn't work very well. When I take it to the club layout and we have a bus run that's 5,000 feet long and it gets to the other end, the decoder doesn't respond appropriately. So these are not mandatory. These are optional, not required. The manufacturers, the good manufacturers, want to meet the standards.
It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity. It's all